Behavioral finance. We have heard, or might many of you, though you are not directly belonging to the field of finance or management, but you have heard about finance. Finance is something related to money or something managing money, something related to these things which is called finance or financial management. But now, what this is all of a sudden behavioral finance? Okay, like does finance have some behavior just like we human being have some behavior? Can we say that finance is also having behavior? Like our organization have some behavior. Sorry. Our organization have some behavior. Like today someone is in the helm of affairs of Computer Society of India, and this Computer Society of India is behaving in one particular way. Tomorrow, some other persons will be there in the business of managing Computer Society of India. And don't you think that your Computer Society of India will be behaving something differently? The organization, a finance officer of a organization of a university of or finance controller of a company change, the entire financial behavior of that company also gets changed. So that's why if organization have some behavior, similarly, finance is only one subset of entire organization system. In one organization, there are many departments, maybe marketing department, operations department, production department, finance department, accounting department. And if entire organization can have one behavior, so its department also have some behavior, and that is called financial behavior. But here we will be discussing about behavioral finance. So definitely there will be certain theories which were there in the traditional finance, and there will be some theories which is there in the behavioral finance which will be contradicting, or some of the theories are supporting the traditional finance. Now what is that? So as I told you that we have heard about finance. So traditionally when we talk about finance or this traditional finance, there are certain assumptions. Most of the theories, those who have studied finance or economics have heard about some of the theories are there in finance, and those theories are having certain assumptions. What are those assumptions? For example, one assumption on which most of the theories are based is the perfect market, that the markets are perfect. Now what is perfect market? There are certain assumptions of perfect market again. Like what are those assumptions? So one assumption is that perfect market, in perfect market, there is a large number of buyers and sellers, there are no taxes, there is no entry and exit barrier, uh, homogeneous product. These are some of the features of perfect market. So most of the theories of finance, whether it is the classical theories like theory, or the theories of this most of the theory in economics, or even in neoclassical theories, one such assumption is the perfect market conditions. This is one assumption. And at the same time, we also know that this perfect market, it does not exist in reality, because we cannot have a market where there will be large number of buyers and sellers. Just think about your market, IT market, software. There are large number of buyers but many number of suppliers, good number of suppliers, but we cannot say that there is infinite number of suppliers and infinite number of buyers, or large number of buyers and large number of sellers. This assumption does not hold good. Second assumption in case of perfect market is the homogeneous product. The product is not homogeneous. Every company is offering different product, so the product is also not homogeneous. There are no taxes. Definitely you must be knowing that this assumption cannot be hold good in a country or in any economic system anywhere in the world. There has to be taxes, so then only the government can survive. There are no entry and exit barrier. That means any company or any player in the market can enter and any player in the market can exit. You also know that this condition also is not fulfilling this criteria. That most of this in the current scenario, this condition is also not fulfilled. So that's why this perfect market, though it is one of the primary assumption of most of the theories in finance, but it does not hold good. Second second assumption in traditional finance is the investor rationality. that investors are rational. Investors will be trying to maximize their benefits, or investors will be trying to or they will be opting for a situation or a decision which will give them the maximum return for a given level of risk, or they will try to minimize the return for a given level of return risk. They will try to minimize their risk for a given level of return. Like investors are rational. We will know that if we just see in the market that investors are not all the time rational, rather investors are emotional. Most of the time, we as a customer, when we enter into the market, do you think that every time we behave rationally? Most of the time, we are governed by our emotions. Sometimes maybe some greed or some fear, some love, some affection. Most of the emotions are there with us, this anxiety, and we took decision based on our emotions, and later on we just try to use logic or justification to rationalize those decisions. So the decisions are taken by our emotions, but logic and justification is used to justify those decisions, and we'll claim that we are actually rational human being. But the fact remains same, that we are not rational. But again, at the same time, can we say that we are irrational? We are irrational. That is also a question mark. We cannot say that we are irrational. But the in between perfect rationality and between irrationality, there is a term called our rationality is biased rationality. We are biased towards something. Anything, just take any example, maybe India Pakistan, this situation, just to consider. We cannot say that we are rational all the time, because we love our country, and based on that we are taking some of the decisions. So we cannot also say that we are irrational, but our rationality is biased towards our motherland. Similarly, so is the situation for a person who is residing in Pakistan or who is a citizen of China. They will be taking decisions based on their own emotions, and we also cannot say that they are irrational, but their rationality is biased rationality. So this is the situation. Another assumption of traditional finance is that the resources are allocated efficiently. So most of the theories, or even in the practice also, we have seen that resources are not all the time allocated efficiently. There are some degree of inefficiency in the allocation of resources, and people take care of all the available information before taking any decision. This is also related to this investor rationality, that people take care of all the available information. They will consider all the options before taking any decision. Theoretically it seems good, but if you just see, being a student of computer science, like before installing any software, most of the time you are asked about some license, or you have to click on yes, I agree to the terms and conditions of that software. And if I ask you how many times you have taken care of all the available information, or you have read even all the informations before taking any decision or before installing a software in your system, the answer is like a vast majority of you will say that we have not read all the terms and conditions of a software before installing it. So meaning thereby, people do not consider all the available information. Or just to be on a lighter side, suppose if someone have to marry, and if they have to take care of all the available information before taking any decision, and if they suppose if a man wants to marry a woman, then he has to see all the available women in the world, so as to arrive at a best decision, and ultimately the result will be that that person will remain bachelor throughout his life. So ultimately the thing is that we are not rational, but we have to marry someone, and that is governed by our emotions, and later on we'll justify logic and rationality, okay, this was the best decision. So these are some of the assumptions of traditional finance. But instead of having such a vast number of theories, our traditional finance have failed. Our traditional finance have failed to predict major happenings in the market, be it the dot-com burst of the dot-com bubble, or the great financial crisis of the world, or the crisis which has resulted because of this corona lockdown or the corona crisis. The market have crashed. If we just consider about this Indian market, Bombay Stock Exchange, the Sensex was at 41,000 in March, second week of March 2020, and just immediately after the lockdown it came down to 25,000. So though we had a huge number of theories, very sophisticated theories related to the finance or economics or the stock market, but most of the theories or none of the theories have accurately predicted the major happenings in the stock market. They could not predict the financial crisis of 2008. They could not predict the burst of the dot-com bubble of 2008. They could not predict most of the market crash, whether it is the great market crash of 1987 or this the scam of 1992 or 1996, or there are so many such kind of incidents happening in the market. So they could not predict. Why? Because most of the time human being or the players in the market, they are not rational. And then if they are not rational, then who are they? Because they are emotional, and the investors or the players in the market, they are governed by their emotions. And what kind of emotions it is, we'll just come to know later on. Some of the theories of traditional finance on which the traditional finance is dependent is it assumes that efficient market hypothesis. It assumes that the markets are efficient. What is an efficient market? It means that the market takes care of all the available informations, and the prices in the market, they reflect all the available informations, and the informations are discounted and it is reflected in the prices. That is the crux of efficient market hypothesis. But if the prices are available and if the prices are reflecting all the available information in the market, then you just ask a question to itself. If the prices are correct, then why do the people go for the intraday trading? Why do the market fluctuates? If the markets are efficient, then there should not be any efficiency. And if the markets are people have all the informations, then there should not be any fluctuation in the market region. The security or the asset which is profitable to me, the same security will be lucrative, or they will become available, or they will become attractive to the other players also. So since I know that this is a very profitable security, I will not sell it, because that is available to me, because I know that this is a very valuable security. And if I will not sell it, then other people will not be able to buy it, and hence there will be very little trading in the market. The trading in the market, like whether it is a stock market or it is a housing market or it is any other market, why do people trade? Because I believe that I have some information which is not available with any other persons, and then that's why I will be buying some of the assets with an assumption that later on I will be able to sell it at a higher price, because I have some information which others do not have. Expected utility theory, where it assumes that people go for maximizing their utility. Modern portfolio theory is about the mean risk and return only. Like people used to construct their portfolio considering the risk and return profile of the different assets. Okay. There are some price reaction to the non-information in the stock market, like the crash of 1987. 22.6% decline without any apparent news. There was no news at all. The theory says that whenever there is a good news, market will go up. When there is bad news, market will come down. But in 1987, there was a crash of 22% and there was no news at all. 50 largest one-day stock price movement occurred on the days of no major announcement. And the inclusion of a stock in S&P 500 index results in a significant share price reactions. So irrational behavior of professional money managers are also there. That will come later on. Okay. Now, when we have to talk about this expected utility theory, first of all, we have to understand what is expected utility and how to calculate this expected return. Suppose there are 5 shares, share 1, share 2, share 3, share 4, and share 5, and we know that we do not know actually with accuracy what will be the return. So we have given a certain probability that if the economy is good, the chances will be 0.25%, average economy's chances are 0.5%, and poor economy chances are 0.25%. And if economy is good, share 1 has the potential to give a return of 20%. If the economy will be average, it will give a return of 18%, and if there are poor economy, it will give a return of 15%. So we can calculate the expected return for share 1, that is probability of happening the first incident and then multiplied by the return, probability of happening average economy and multiplied by return, and probability of having poor economy multiplied by the return, and ultimately the expected return for share 1 is 17.75%. Similarly, we can calculate for share 2, share 3, share 4, share 5, and so on. Okay, we have calculated the return. Now if we have to construct a portfolio, now what is portfolio? Portfolio, for a layman, simply it is a bundle of securities. If you are having only one security, it is your security only. But suppose you have invested some part in security 1, some amount in security 2, some amount in security 3. So if you have more than one number of securities, so that will be considered as portfolio. So like you might have heard in the newspaper that this is a portfolio investment, or this portfolio, that portfolio. Portfolio is simply a group of security, a bunch of security if you are holding, then that becomes portfolio. So if a person wants to have a portfolio of share 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and in the ratio of 1:2:3:4:5, then we can calculate the return of portfolio. How? 1/15, that is 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, and this share 1 will be having only 1, and its expected return is 17.75, plus 2 and 3, 4, 5, 6, and ultimately we can get a return, a portfolio return of 22%. So our portfolio return is 22%, expected utility is 22%, and traditional finance says that if you go by this portfolio, your return will be 22%. And if we know with accuracy, then everybody would have invested in the market and earn a return of 22%, because we know it. But we know that this is not so easy because of various factors, maybe the fear or the greed, because these returns that we have given at the beginning, the 20%, 18%, these are expected return, estimated return, they are not actual return. The share market, it does not give the guaranteed return. It is just expected that this might return, this might be the level of return or the rate of return. Okay, so this theory, it assumes that all investors are identical, and if all investors are identical and all investors are utility maximizers, all investors use Bayes rule to form new belief as new information becomes available. So all investors' predictions are accurate, that is expected utility plus rational expectation equal to the market efficiency. So the market will be efficient, all investors are identical, all investors will be having the same information. So there will not be, and market will be efficient, so there will not be any fluctuation in the market. And there cannot be any undervalued security in the market, there cannot be any overvalued security in the market, because the prices are correct. And if prices are correct, once again I reiterate the fact, if prices are correct, then there will not be any fluctuation in the market. But every day we heard in the news that market have reached a new high, market have fallen significantly, market have rose 1000 points, fallen 2000 points, this and that. It means that markets are not efficient. So now comes this behavioral finance. So if the markets are not efficient, the traditional finance is not able to predict the major happenings in the market, and the traditional finance is the assumptions of the traditional finance are not fulfilled, then what is behavioral finance? Here comes the role of behavioral finance. So the behavioral finance states that by considering psychological factors into account, the effectiveness of investment strategies can be enhanced. So it is a branch of study that uses psychology based theories to explain stock market anomalies. So behavioral finance is such a discipline which considers psychology, because when the market goes up and down, actually this is the psychology of the investors. Something happens in the America and the Bombay Stock Exchange starts shrinking. Why? Because it's the psychology of the investors. Sociology. Sociology of the investors also play a significant role in deciding their finances. I'm just giving you one example. Uh, the sociological background of a person, if he belongs to a Muslim community, so there are certain things, certain practices which are considered haram, like interest is a forbidden activity in Islam. So if a person who is true believer of Islam, or who is a very means he's a believer of Islam, so that person will not be investing in a security which actually deals with interest. So definitely that person will not be buying a stock of a bank, howsoever profitable it is. You just suggest that person buy State Bank of India or Yes Bank or Indian Overseas Bank or BGA Bank share, because they are very profitable shares, and in future there are chances that these shares might go at a very higher level. But since his belief or her belief does not allow to invest in a company which deals with interest, he or she will not invest in that company. Another example, like uh, alcohol is prohibited in Islam. So if a person is given an option to invest in a company, say for example United Spirit, which deals in the liquor, definitely he will not be investing in that business. So that is the sociology of a person also affect the portfolio. What kind of portfolio? Just now I have given you the, like, you can construct a portfolio, but the choice that you will be having is not only dependent on the economic parameters, rather the sociology of a person also affects what kind of choices he will be making. The psychology of a person, anthropology, the history of a person. Like a farmer, howsoever rich he is or she is, the farmer definitely he is not aware about the stock market, and that's why when if you ask a farmer to construct his portfolio, he will be choosing bank fixed deposit or Kisan Vikas Patra or Indra Vikas Patra, that is not longer Kisan Vikas Patra, or bank fixed deposit or postal deposit for as an avenue to park his or her money. The economic factors, others, the political factors, just some political decisions are there, some political factors are there, and that will also decide what kind of finance will be there with us, what will be the behavior of our individual finance. So this is psychology, sociology, anthropology, economics, political science, accounting, everything taken together have an impact on the behavioral finance. So the rationality of studying behavioral finance is that people behave with extreme rationality, but there are instances that it is not always correct, and most financial theories are based on the assumption that everyone takes careful account of all available information. During the classical period, economics had a close link with psychology. The classical period is like Adam Smith, and prior to him, there was a close linkage of psychology with economics. Here I have taken the name of Adam Smith. In Indian society also, or Indian context, like most of our the classical economists like Kautilya or Chanakya, they also will be considered as a classical economist only, and during that period economics was having a close linkage with the psychology, or even political science was having a close linkage with economics. If you have read the book written by Chanakya, that is Arthashastra, we'll find that Arthashastra is basically a book of not only economics, but it also deals about the political science. So political science, psychology, and economics were not considered differently during those periods. But during the neoclassical period, economics began to distance themselves from psychology during the development of neoclassical economics, and this was primarily because they sought to reshape the discipline as a natural science. And in the 20th century, psychology had fully disappeared from the economic discussions, and the concept of rational human being emerges, that human beings are rational, and if we are rational, then there is no scope for emotion, there is no scope for psychology. And this is how the psychology or even anthropology or sociology has disappeared from the economic discussions, and finally we have economics, which is without any psychology, without any emotions, and without any political science, and pure economics. But of late, at the beginning of 21st century, economists started to link this economics with the psychology, and the first person in this category is Daniel Kahneman. This is the person who was given Nobel Prize of Economics in the year 2002. And another interesting feature about this Daniel Kahneman is that the Nobel Prize of Economics was given to a person he is from psychology and for his work on prospect theory. So Daniel Kahneman is a psychologist, but his work in economics and linking psychology with the economics, and for that he was given Nobel Prize in the year 2002. So, and in the year 2017, the Nobel Prize of Economics was given to Richard Thaler. His photo is not there in this slide. So Richard Thaler for his work on nudge theory. Now, what is that nudge theory and prospect theory? We'll just discuss later on. So when we have discussed about the theory, it means that there are certain theories in behavioral finance. But the fact is that there are no specific theory in behavioral finance. The theories are from other disciplines such as psychology or anthropology or economics. And we, the behavioral finance people, are actually adopting them with our context. We're translating it in the context of behavioral finance. So the first theory is the prospect theory, given by Tversky and Kahneman in 1979. And they found that contrary to the expected utility theory, people placed different weights on gains and losses on different ranges of probability. We'll just discuss it with one example. Prospect theory says that individuals are much more distressed by the prospective losses than they are happy by the equivalent gains. This theory says that the happiness that we'll be receiving by earning X amount, say 100 rupees, will be half than that of the pain that we'll be having by losing equivalent amount. It means losses gives pain which are double than that of the pleasure of gaining the equivalent amount. Once again, like the pain that we will be having by losing 100 rupees will be twice than that of the pleasure of gaining 100 rupees. And people are willing to take more risk to avoid losses than to realize gains. Till now, the traditional finance or the traditional economist theories, they says that more is the risk, more is the gain. And if someone wants to maximize their risk, he or she has to take more risk. Or like people, those who take more risk, they are actually the people who earn more. But this theory says that until and unless people are put to a situation when they are faced with the sure and certain loss, they do not take any risk. People are normally risk averse. They do not want to take any risk. They will be taking risk only when taking risk, no other options are left. They have given this experiment, risk aversion versus seeking aversion. Two options. Option A, 50% chance to win 2,50,000 and 50% chance to win nothing. And option B, sure win of 1,25,000. Just now we have learned about the expected utility theory. And if we calculate the expected utility of option A, the expected utility of option A is 50% chance of 2,50,000 plus 50% of 0. So ultimately the expected utility will be 1,25,000. And in option B, expected utility is 1,25,000. Means in terms of utility, both the options are equal. Just see it. Expected value of option A is 1,25,000 and expected utility of option B is 1,25,000. But when the people were given this choice, it was around 78% of the people, they have chosen option B, that is a certain gain of 1,25,000. They have not gone for taking risk. अगर risk लेंगे तो हमें we will be able to gain 2,50,000. they have not gone for maximizing their return, or they have not taken any risk. 78% of the people, they are very happy with 1,25,000. It means that they are risk averse people. But just reverse the scenario. Option A, 50% chance to lose 2,50,000 and 50% chance to lose 0. And option B was certain loss of 1,25,000. Again, in terms of expected utility value, the value option A was 2,50,000 into 50%, and 0 into 50 minus 1,25,000. Means in terms of expected utility value, both the options are equally loss making, that loss of 1,25,000. But here, when the people were given this choice, 61% of the people, they have chosen option A. Now here see, when the same situation was placed in the context of gain, people were risk averse. But when the same situation was placed in terms of loss, people were becoming risk seeking. Because here, as I told you, that people, there is a certain loss of 1,25,000. So in that case, people have become risk taker, and they will be taking risk. Okay, ठीक है, 2,50,000 loss भी होने से होगा, but there are chances कि their loss will be 0 also. So in this situation, people were risk takers. So that's why the crux of this theory is that people become risk takers to avoid losses, to minimize their losses, not to maximize their gains. This is the contradictory theory, as like the theory contradictory to the well-known theory of like people wants to have more profit and more risk. That's why they want to have more risk. Okay, so when we are faced with a sure gain, we tend to be risk averse, but when we are faced with a certain loss, we tend to be risk seeking. Two problems are identical in terms of net cash to the subject. However, the phrasing the question causes the problem to be interpreted differently. So this is the crux of prospect theory. Another theory is the regret theory. So regret is the feeling of sadness, repentance, or disappointment over an occurrence or something that one has done or failed to do. So hello?
Yes,
You are audible.
yes.
Okay.
We are getting your voice. Yeah.
Okay. So regret is that it's a feeling of sadness. Now, in the context of a stock market also, this regret is there. Now, what is that regret? Fear of regret. Okay, here it is. Okay, some problem in this slide. Okay, anyway, so regret theory says that, like the professor statement of Santa Clara University, he has seen that people are actually not selling the stocks which have gone down in value. Rather, they are selling a stock which has gone up in value. So suppose we have purchased two stocks, say 100, one at 100 rupees and another stock at 200 rupees, and after some time the stock which we have purchased for 100 rupees has gone up to 500 rupees, and the stock which we have purchased for 200 rupees have fallen to 150 rupees, and we are in need of money. And it has been seen that people have the tendency to sell a stock which have gone high in value. Okay. Now, okay, let us see. So, like it is seen that the people have the tendency to sell a stock which have gone up in value. जो profitable stock है उसको लोग बेचते हैं. But the rationality says that the stock which is not profitable, which is loss-making stock, that should be eliminated from your portfolio. I'm just giving one example, very simple example. In 2011, India won World Cup. Yesterday, India won another test match against England. Now, why actually our team India is such a good team? Because we are continuously eliminating those who are not performing, and those who are performing, we are keeping them in our team. So we have a team of match winners. Think of a situation just reverse, कि जिसने अच्छा परफॉर्म किया उसको आप टीम से बाहर कर दीजिए, और जिसने खराब परफॉर्म किया उसको टीम में रखिए. Now what will be the situation of a team? A cricket team is also a portfolio of players. Similarly, a portfolio of stocks, a stock जिसका जो अच्छा परफॉर्म नहीं कर रहा है उसको आप अपने पोर्टफोलियो में रख रहे हैं, अपनी टीम में रख रहे हैं. a stock जो अच्छा परफॉर्म कर रहा है उसको आपने बाहर कर दिया. And ultimately after some time you will be having a portfolio of only losing stocks, the stock which are only losing in value. And considering those portfolio you are trying to make a build winning portfolio, this is not possible. But the thing is that why this is happening, this regret, लोगों का एक regret होता है. Again go back to the prospect theory, कि अगर उन्होंने loss making stock को आज बेच दिया, so a loss will be registered, loss will be realized in the books of account. So long as the stocks are not sold, the losses will not be realized. And once the stocks are sold, the loss will appear in our books of account, it will be realized. And you know that the prospect theory says that losses gives pain, so people will be having regret why they have sold. They just want to avoid that regret, the fear of regret or the pain that they don't want to have, and that's why they just hold on the stock which is losing, in spite of the fact that this is not a good stock, still they used to hold it. Anchoring is another very important theory. उसको ज़्यादा डिटेल में नहीं जाते हुए जस्ट आई विल से दैट एक पॉपकॉर्न का जो पैकेट होता है on a street it is for 10 rupees. One small packet of popcorn, it cost around 10 rupees on a street. But if on the street side the vendor is asking 20 rupees, we'll simply say 10 रुपए का पॉपकॉर्न 20 में दे रहा है, बेवकूफ बना रहे. But the same size of popcorn in a multiplex movie hall, movie theater, PVR में चले जाइए, वो 300 रुपए का देता है, और उसके बाद वो लगाता है कि आज टुडे स्पेशल ऑफर 30% डिस्काउंट, सो 300 का जो है आपको 210 में मिल रहा है, और आप बोलेंगे कि आज स्पेशल ऑफर था, मुझे 210 में ही वो सेम पॉपकॉर्न मिल गया. बट द फैक्ट इज दैट आप 200 रुपये उसका ज्यादा देकर के आ रहे हैं. सो एंकरिंग इज आप कंपेयर कहां से कर रहे हैं, द रेफरेंस पॉइंट. 10 रुपया का जो पॉपकॉर्न है अगर 20 पैसे मिलता है सड़क पे, वो आपको बहुत महंगा लगता है, लेकिन वही 10 रुपए का पॉपकॉर्न 210 में मिलता है पीवीआर में, वो आपको सस्ता लगता है. दिस इज एंकरिंग. अंडर रिएक्शन, ओवर रिएक्शन. मार्केट ऑलवेज ओवर रिएक्ट, अंडर रिएक्ट, बोथ आर हैपनिंग साइमल्टेनियसली. जब भी कोई नई इंफॉर्मेशन आती इमीडिएटली मार्केट ओवर रिएक्ट टू इट, बट आफ्टर सम टाइम मार्केट उस पर एडजस्ट हो जाता है और वो एक नॉर्मल लेवल पे आ जाता है. एंड हियर द ट्रेडर्स और द आर्बिट्रेजर्स, they just try to catch that very moment of market, that when the market is under reacting or overreacting. And now, being a student of computer science for you all, if you can just develop a software where just the entire market data will be there, and the market, that software can only predict when the market is overreacting or underreacting, then this will be giving a very good opportunity for the traders to make immediate investment and make some immediate profit. ओवर रिएक्शन, एक छोटी सी इंफॉर्मेशन मार्केट में आई कि सम बैड न्यूज एंड द मार्केट विल फॉल मोर देन द प्रोपोर्शनेट, दैट इज ओवर रिएक्शन. बट आफ्टर सम टाइम द मार्केट विल गो बैक टू इट्स नॉर्मल लेवल. So that for a very short period market, either it is coming down or it is going up more than the proportionate level, that is overreaction. And this time is very important for a market participants, the players in the market or the traders, to make profit. So if we can make some software which can predict whether the market is overreacting or underreacting, or this artificial intelligence, can we use this artificial intelligence to read the market whether it is overreacting or underreacting, then that can be a very good contribution, or that amalgamation of computer science and finance, behavioral finance especially at this point. mental accounting. Suppose someone is headed to a movie and he is about to enter the theater and he found that he has lost the ticket worth rupees 200, and then still he wants to see the movie. He has to pay another 200 for the new ticket. One may still purchase another ticket, but he will feel that he has paid rupees 400 for a movie which is worth rupees 200 only. Let the scenario be constructed in a different way. Someone is going to a movie and he has discovered that he has lost a bill for rupees 200. Definitely he or she will be disappointed, but would this affect his decision to buy a movie ticket? Definitely no. Most of the time people will feel sorry about the lost money, but probably this won't if affect their decision to buy a movie ticket, and they will buy a movie ticket. It was found that 46% of those who were lost the ticket were willing to buy a replacement ticket, whereas 88% of those who lost an equivalent amount of cash are willing to buy a ticket. Losses, since the lost ticket and the lost cash had the same value, their loss would have been experienced in the same way, but this is not happening. Loss of a ticket is given more weightage when it comes to going to the cinema hall, but the loss of equivalent amount of cash is not taken seriously while purchasing the ticket for a cinema. So this is some of there are many theories in one very important theory is the herd behavior. Herd behavior, the meaning is the tendency of a people or a group of individuals to react coherently without there being any coordination between them. Herd behavior, जैसे कि भेड़ चाल. When you will see that when everybody is buying in the market, people start buying. Why? Because everybody is buying. उसने खरीदा इसलिए मैं भी खरीदा, उसने खरीदा इसलिए मैं भी खरीदा, इसने बेचा इसलिए मैं भी बेचा. There should be a proper coordination, there should be a application of mind, there should be proper analysis before making any investment decision or any selling decision, but this is not seen among the people. They just behave without applying their mind. This is called herd behavior. It is evident in the stock market that market registers fluctuations in the market, and not event themselves but the human reactions to these events. And the large stock market trends often begin and end with periods of fragile buying or selling. Many observers cite these episodes as clear example of herd behavior that is irrational and driven by emotion, greed in bubble and fear in crisis. Again, what the rational behavior says. Warren Buffett says that one should be extremely greedy when others are fearful, and one should be fearful when others are greedy. These two emotions actually drives the stock market, greed and fear. But it is seen in the market that when everybody is greedy, or most of the people are greedy, I will also become greedy. And when everybody is fearful and they are selling, I will be fearful and I will also sell. That is a reverse behavior, contradictory behavior. अगर सब कोई greedy है, it means that everybody is buying, the prices are high, and this is a time for a rational trader to sell, क्योंकि हर कोई खरीद रहा है तो दाम ज्यादा मिलेगा तो मुझे बेचना चाहिए, और जब हर कोई बेच रहा है, everybody is fearful, so दाम उसका कम है, so this is a time I should buy because the same stock हर कोई बेच रहा है तो दाम सस्ते में मिलेगा, मुझे खरीदना है उस वक्त. So Warren Buffett, one of the biggest investor in the world, he has given a very simple formula that be greedy when others are fearful, and be fearful when others are greedy. Overconfidence is also another very important bias in the stock market. That is, people normally have overconfidence in their ability, and that's why people say that this will not happen to me. Another example of overconfidence is that people during this corona, people are going out without any mask, without any protection, on a belief that this will not happen to me. So this is an example of overconfidence only, and this kind of overconfidence is also visible in the market, that people have the overconfidence in their own ability. They have seen people losing money, they have seen people making similar kind of mistakes, but they will not be learning any lesson from those mistakes because they have overconfidence in themselves that this will not happen to me. This is overconfidence. Some social and cultural practices I have already explained while discussing the foundation of behavioral finance. Some anomalies are there, like day of the week effect. It says that on one particular day of the week, the markets are normally very high or very low. So this is the day of the week effect. This is an anomaly. Why this is happening, we have no answer for that. At least in the traditional finance, there is no answer for that. January effect. January effect says that in the month of January, the return given by the small cap companies is relatively higher than the return of any other month. So in the month of January, the small cap companies, the small scale companies, they give relatively higher return than the rest of the month. So this is January effect. This also is not explained by the traditional finance, but behavioral finance have an explanation to this. Lunar effect. On full moon day, the markets are normally upward, and on the no moon day, the markets are normally on the downward. This is also just one anomaly. There are criticisms of behavioral finance. People say that this is just a collection of anomaly and this is not a full-fledged discipline. It is not applicable to the market situations, and limitations of experimental and survey-based technique and weak empirical evidence. These are some of the criticisms which are leveled against this behavioral finance. But one should understand that behavioral finance is a very new discipline. It is a newborn baby, and if we are comparing behavioral finance with the traditional finance or full-fledged economics, this is not fair, because we are comparing one newborn baby with a fully grown up person. So this is just a collection of anomalies, but the answer to those anomalies are also trying to be explored through behavioral finance and only. Limitation of experimental and survey based technique. Again, this is a new area, so definitely there will be more surveys, there will be more experiment, there will be more theories to be developed in the area of behavioral finance. This is a completely gray area, so anyone who would like to work in this area, definitely this is a completely unexplored area. Too much emphasis on individual irrationality, because most of the time in behavioral finance we are focusing on the individual irrationality, and more weightage on the attitude than the investment system. This is also actually not a criticism, but actually we have seen that our investment, our portfolio, our investment pattern is a result of our attitude rather than a full-fledged complicated number theory. So there are some arguments in favor of behavioral finance. This is absence of behavioral CAPM, that in traditional finance there is not behavioral theories, but here there is behavioral theories are there. Validity of efficient market hypothesis and investor rationality is questionable, and that's why behavioral finance investors make systematic mental mistakes. That is also studied in behavioral finance. So these are some of the assumptions of arguments in favor of behavioral finance. So this is just in 1 hour whatever I have tried to portray, I have or just to communicate with you people. I hope I will be doing some justice with you. Thank you, and if you have any question, please feel free to ask.